Revelation 2789. From the 26th and the 27th of June 1943. Matter. Change, upward evolution. Serve. The everlasting process of change can be observed in all creations and therefore has to proceed according to divine will, because no other being can carry out its will in the works of creation. It is God's will that the spiritual substance bound in the works of creation should change, and this change can only take place if the external form also undergoes a change, and this external change is therefore the actual life of the spiritual substance. It is, so to speak, the visible sign of an ascent development of the spiritual substance sheltering within, for as long as it remains in its resistance to God, the external form also remains almost unchanged. From this it is to be concluded that all solid matter which remains in its kind and nature for a long time holds spiritual in itself which is opposed to God, and that this matter should not be striven for by man if it is not needed for a serving purpose. If matter is used to form things which are useful to the human being, then the human being himself contributes to the transformation of such external forms. But if an external form remains and is desired by people for the sake of this external form, then the human being is in danger of being dominated by matter, and this is a disadvantage for his soul. There are countless things which could be counted as so-called dead matter and which are desired by people without them fulfilling a serving purpose. These are ornamental objects of all kinds which merely trigger joy in earthly possession without fulfilling a purpose. They are merely an enticement of the world as long as they serve to fulfill their own desires and do not fulfill their purpose in serving neighborly love. The spiritual bound in this matter captivates the human being's senses, and this signifies a spiritual regression for the latter, since he desires something he has long since overcome, and the spiritual in matter finds support through the human being's desire by striving for the possession of what he desires, and he gives the spiritual in the form the opportunity to remain in the form for a long time. But what does not change in its outer form does not progress in upward development either. To desire such solid matter as a possession is extremely disadvantageous for the soul of man. For he makes himself a slave of matter, it conquers him instead of man conquering matter. Objects which are created by human hands but which have no serving purpose are likewise suitable to arouse human desire and now remain in their form for a long time, and the spiritual is bound in it for just as long a time. It cannot develop upwards because it is prevented from serving, because it lacks the will to do so. But the human being does not help this spiritual substance either by carefully protecting solid matter from every change, and thus prolongs the constraint around the spiritual substance through his love for dead matter. Likewise, objects of use whose actual purpose is a serving one but which are not used for their actual purpose again due to their love for matter are an agonizing shackle for the spiritual substance contained therein as long as the human being remains in love with such things. If the external form is not changed by divine will, that is, if such objects are destroyed by various causes against human will, then the spiritual in the form is willing to serve, and the external fetter is loosened or destroyed despite human love for it. A change of the external form, thus of all works of creation, must take place if these works are to fulfill their purpose. The spiritual in every work of creation must mature through service and then be released again for the next stage of its development. The human being's love for matter prolongs the compulsive state of the spiritual substance within it. The stubborn spiritual substance, which does not let up in its opposition to God, now also influences people's thinking to unite with it. Thus it drives towards materialism and causes great spiritual devastation amongst humanity. Nevertheless, this spiritual substance feels the compulsion caused by the external form and unlawfully tries to escape it. It tries to confuse human thinking, that is, God-opposing forces use people's weakness for dead matter in order to incite them to unkindness towards each other, to unlawfully appropriate their fellow human beings' matter and, if necessary, to achieve this through violence, which can also have a destructive effect on matter. The spiritual, in its ignorance, believes to be free when its outer form is destroyed by people's unkindness. A violent destruction is therefore never spiritual progress but an unlawfully interrupted course of development, because becoming free from a form only depends on whether this form fulfills a serving purpose. And in the same way, the destruction of an outer form must have as its cause the will to produce something new from it, which again fulfills a serving purpose. Then the change of the outer form is willed by God, and for the spiritual in it an ascent to the heights. Amen.